Fangio sees red at Laguna. Rusty wins but loses a crew chief. And sprint car drivers fight for $50,000. This and more next on Speed Week.
Speed Week is brought to you by Dodge. For performance, quality, safety, and value, welcome home, America.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last Speed Week for the month of July. I'm Bob Jenkins. Another big weekend of racing coming up here on ESPN, beginning tonight with the final live Saturday Night Thunder race, and then tomorrow, Formula One and IMSA. The Camel GT Series is at Portland International Raceway for the G.I. Joe's Grand Prix. Bob Varsha, who normally anchors our Formula One telecast, will lead the IMSA broadcast tomorrow. Bob, a bit of a change of pace for you.
You got that right, Bob. I guess Nigel, Alain, Ayrton, and the boys will have to get along without me this weekend. But after all, Formula One still has half a season to go. While here at Portland, the Camel GT Series is in its final 3 races, including tomorrow's 97-lapper around this beautiful 1.9-mile road course. Now, the story everyone's talking about is not the title fight between Nissan drivers Jeff Brabham and Chip Robinson and Davy Jones from Jaguar in third. No, it's the newest creation from Dan Gurney's All-American Toyota shops, a new Mark III Toyota Eagle that should have won last weekend's round at Laguna Seca. Davy Jones won the race, but not until the newest Toyota was penalized. In fact, Fangio had a 54-second advantage over Jones when it came time for the final pit stops. With the field behind the pace car under a full-course caution, Fangio took on fuel, then ran an IMSA red flag at the pit exit, getting back on the track ahead of the pace car. Needless to say, IMSA was unhappy with Fangio's actions. They penalized him 2 laps, resulting in a 7th-place finish.
They put the red flag a little late. I was already too close to stop. So if you brake, you can spin, you can hit the guy with the red flag. They were right, something that you don't want to do.
Now, the other story this weekend in Portland concerns the Camel Lights class. Parker Johnstone clinched this title a week ago at Laguna Seca while sitting in the pits. Parker blew the engine in his Acura for the first time this season, then sat and watched as second in points David Tennyson could only manage a 2nd-place finish, and that gave Parker all the room he needed for the Drivers' Championship.
My job is to win the Manufacturers' Championship for Acura. Winning the Drivers' Championship was a nice bonus, but that's not what I was hired to do. And I won't rest until we've either won that championship or they'll probably bury me sometime this winter from grief and anxiety.
Now, of course, you can't have Tweedledum without Tweedledee, so joining me for our Portland broadcast this weekend is my Formula One colleague, David Hobbs. David, with only 3 races to go, that Camel GT title is still up for grabs.
It is. It looks pretty good for Jeff Brabham, who's had an amazingly consistent season so far with a ton of 2nd places. Davy Jones has won 4 races, and of course last year he absolutely swept this race and has to do that again this year if he wants to stay in with a championship chance.
Last weekend at Oulton Park in England, Paul Warwick, 22-year-old younger brother of Derek Warwick, was killed in a racing crash while dominating the British Formula 3000 season this year. David, that's a loss not only to his family, but to the sport.
Well, it certainly is, Bob. I first met Paul when he absolutely dominated the Formula Ford 1600 series back in '86, racing against my son Greg. He had a couple of bad years, but this year has absolutely dominated the Formula 3000 championship in Britain, winning all 5 rounds so far, including the one in which he was killed, which he was leading. So it is going to be a real loss to motor racing, but we do extend our utmost sympathy to Derek and, of course, the whole Warwick family.
That's it from Portland, Bob. We'll be coming your way at 4:30 Eastern Time here on ESPN with the G.I. Joe's Grand Prix.
All right, guys. The other race that can be seen here on ESPN tomorrow is the Grand Prix of Germany. Yesterday, Alain Prost announced that he would become a free agent at the end of this season. And Satoru Nakajima said he was going to get out of Formula One after this year. Join Richter Brühl, former Formula One driver John Watson, and John Bizignano for live coverage of the German Grand Prix beginning at 7:50 Eastern Time tomorrow morning. The CART PPG Indy cars are taking a well-deserved week off following 3 races in 3 weeks. The most recent was the Molson Indy Toronto, also seen right here on ESPN. Michael Andretti started from the pole and 6 laps in was challenged by defending series and race champion Al Unser Jr. Michael continued in the lead, but then Little Al brushed the wall with the left side of the car. At the next corner, as he applied the brakes, the left front suspension broke, and Little Al was the first to drop out of the event. Mike Groff, named to replace A.J. Foyt in the remaining road course races, gave the Copenhagen car a good ride, starting 9th and finishing 8th. It was the best non-oval finish for the team since the Meadowlands a year ago. Michael led all 103 laps, beating his father Mario by 16 seconds. Afterwards, they savored their first 1-2 finish of the year. Bobby Rahal was third, but his lead in the points has dwindled to only 23 over the younger Andretti. Behind them, the points remain the same, with Alonso Jr. third, followed by Penske teammates Rick Mears and Emerson Fittipaldi. CART's next race, the Marlboro, Michigan 500 next week, where CART hopes to release its 1992 schedule, and Chevrolet announces which teams will get the Indy V8 next year.
SpeedWeek is brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. By Dodge, for performance, quality, safety, and value. Welcome home, America. And by Citibank, MasterCard, and Visa. Make sure your cards say Citibank.
Coming up, Shirley's wheels are set to turn again. In drag racing news, the Castrol GTX Top Fuel team has signed a replacement for Gary Ormsby, who we told you last week was suffering from colon cancer. 42-year-old Gordy Bonin, who has won 6 NHRA funny car events in the 70s and early 80s, will take over next weekend in Seattle. The NHRA is in action this weekend at Sears Point, and Bob Kelly reports on another former Top Fuel champion who's set for a comeback.
Shirley Muldowney, one of only three-time Top Fuel champions, is set to return to action here at the California Nationals. Shirley has competed only twice this year due to a lack of sponsorship, but she has now announced a multi-year deal with Petro Mali that will allow her to return to full-time racing beginning next season.
We have agreed for the 92 and 93 season, and then after that we're going to take it year by year. But they're even looking at down the road when I don't care to drive any longer and wish to put someone else in my car.
In late February, Shirley underwent surgery on her feet, the feet damaged in a terrible accident at San Air in 1984. But she says it's nothing that would prevent her from becoming championship material again at age 51.
Well, I spent some time with Dr. Trammell in February, and he fused a major portion of my foot. So I now have a fused ankle along with a fused foot, and now I know how Rick Mears feels. So it's different, but what it did was it eliminated a lot of the pain that I was going through since the original ankle fusion in 1985.
This year's Top Fuel title chase is heating up following Joe Amato's 4th straight win in Denver last weekend. He clocked a 5.05 in defeating Tommy Johnson Jr. Joe's now only 123 points behind division leader Don Prudhomme.
Well, if we can bring a 4th World Championship to our Team Valvoline Top Fuel Dragster, that'd be the first person to ever do that. Don Garles and Shirley Muldowney and myself have all won 3 times. So it's something about doing something the first time that really drives the person. We really like to do that.
In the funny car finals, Mike Dunn, near lane, went against Ed McCullough. Although the 8th was the first one down the quarter mile, he left the line too early and red-lighted, giving Dunn his 3rd win of the year. A fitting tribute to his former car owner, Joe Paisano, who died Friday afternoon due to a heart attack.
I owe a lot to Joe Paisano. He picked me up when nobody else wanted to pick me up in 1986 when I didn't have a ride, and gave me a chance to prove that I could do this. And obviously I wouldn't be here without him. And I just felt like during the race, I kind of felt like he was there with me, because it seemed like we were kind of destined to win that race, and it worked out really well.
And finally, in Pro Stock, teammates Warren Johnson in the near lane against Scott Jeffreyon. The first time in 20 years that teammates had met in a final round. Jeffreyon, who defeated Pro Stock points leader Darrell Alderman in the semis, got off the line first. But WJ eventually had his way in recording his 3rd victory of the year. This is Bob Kelly reporting for SpeedWeek.
The Winston Cup Series is at Talladega, Alabama this weekend, and Sterling Marlin has won the pole, his 2nd of the year, at a speed of 192.085 miles an hour, the slowest pole there since 1978. By the way, Sterling has the best overall record in the 3 restrictor plate races that have been held so far this year, 2 at Daytona and 1 at Talladega. He leads Dale Earnhardt by a single point. Ernie Irvan is 3rd. NASCAR is using the same size restrictor plate for this race as it did for the Pepsi 400, but as we reported last week, they have increased the size of the rear spoiler from 240 to 280 square inches. Well, last Sunday, the series was at Pocono for the Miller Genuine Draft 500, the 2nd race there in a little over a month. John Kernan reports.
Fords dominated qualifying, capturing 4 of the first 5 positions. But at the start, Kenny Schrader took his Chevrolet Lumina to the top spot, leading 41 of the first 42 laps. Michael Waltrip escaped injury in this fiery crash caused when his car made contact with lake speed. It was one of 9 cautions that flew in the first half of the race. Another was when Derek Cope, whose crew chief Buddy Parrott resigned after this race, was rear-ended by Jimmy Spencer. Neither was injured, but both were finished for the day. The big crash came on lap 71. A bump by Ernie Irvin sent Hutch Strickland sideways, setting up one of the worst wrecks of the year. Richard Petty flew through the air while others tried, some unsuccessfully, to avoid the melee, including Darrell Waltrip. It was Darrell's second major crash in his many races.
I'm just really disgusted. I don't know what's going on. It must be the summer heat, but we got some guys that are just not using any judgment.
Irvin, who was unscathed in the crash, appeared to have the best car for the second half of the race, but found some competition from Rusty Wallace and Mark Martin. Ernie gave up the lead to Rusty during a poorly timed final pit stop for fuel. Shortly thereafter, it began to rain, and the race was stopped for 2 hours. NASCAR tried to restart it and sent the cars to the track under caution. Wallace, desperately low on fuel, got some assistance from his old buddy Dale Earnhardt. Rules say you can't be pushed on the last lap, so when the white flag was shown, Rusty pulled away from Dale and completed the final circuit under his own power. It was Wallace's first win since Bristol in April and his first super speedway victory in more than a year.
We're back, I think. We've got a total new engine program. It's really going good, and I'm real proud of the boys. I can't tell you how proud I am of crew chief Jimmy Maycar and everybody who made this possible.
This is John Kernan reporting for SpeedWeek.
Rusty's praise of crew chief Maycar came a day before he signed with a new team for 1992, headed by Washington Redskins football coach Joe Gibbs, himself a former drag racer. Mike Stevens has that story.
You might say this has been a pretty exciting week for Joe Gibbs. Not only did his starting quarterback Mark Rippon end his training camp holdout, but Gibbs was also able to sign Jimmy Maycar to a contract as the crew chief on his brand new Winston Cup racing team.
There's so many of these things parallel football. I think what you're hiring there is the coach of this team, really. And the crew chief is somebody that's going to be responsible for hiring everybody in back. And his job for us is going to really be important because, as a football coach, I'm not going to be there a lot.
But Gibbs's hectic schedule did not hinder his efforts of pursuing Maycar. And neither did it keep him from nailing down a sponsorship with Interstate Battery, a company that is ironically based in, of all places, Dallas, Texas.
Enemy territory there, and I'm saying, my gosh, we got something in Dallas here. The Dallas Cowboys and Redskins have been such rivalries now. Somebody from Dallas is going to be helping me get into auto racing, and we're going to form a team. That was a great part of the story.
And what a story it is. Before taking the plunge into Winston Cup racing, Gibbs sought and received the advice of many, including longtime Redskins fan Richard Petty.
I've had 3 or 4 of those guys I think really care about me say, now, you sure you know what you're getting into? I think it's like everything else. It'd be the same thing I said to Richard Petty if he told me, he says, I want to own a football team. I think I'd probably be the same way.
At the Redskins training camp in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Mike Stevens reporting for SpeedWeek.
If Gibbs' success in the NFL is any indication, the other Winston Cup teams had better beware. He's the National Football Conference's winningest active coach, 113 games and 2 Super Bowl championships. Here are the latest standings in the balloting for the McDonald's Winston Cup All-Star Team. To cast your vote, dial 1-900-737-TEAM. A record crowd turned out last Saturday night at the Eldora Speedway in Ohio for one of the richest sprint car races of the year, the Kings Royal. Steve Kinzer was hoping to become the first 3-time winner. And Doug Wolfgang, the defending champion, was also going for his 3rd. The action began in the 4th heat. Larry Helms bumped Johnny Herrera, sending him sideways. Herrera was then hit by Jim Neer, causing both to tumble down the front stretch. Neither driver was injured. Herrera had to be escorted from the racetrack by security personnel after exchanging punches with a member of Helm's crew. 24 drivers came to the green for the Kings Royal, each hoping that in 40 laps he would win $50,000. Rick Hood from outside row 1 was the early leader, followed by Stevie Smith Jr. But it would be a night of attrition. After only 3 laps, Doug Wolfgang pulled the pits with terminal engine problems. With Hood and Smith battling for the lead, pole sitter Todd Schaefer hit the third turn wall and flipped. Kevin Huntley pitched his car sideways but couldn't avoid making slight contact. Huntley went on to finish 4th. Schaefer was okay. Shortly after the restart, Steve Kinzer, who had started 5th, made his presence known and began a battle with Smith that would last until lap 23. At that point, Smith's steering broke, sending the car hard into the front stretch wall. Stevie was not hurt, but a spectator standing near the wall suffered a severe but not life-threatening head injury. When that red flag period was over, it looked as if it was going to be a battle between 2 of the best in the business, Kinzer and Sammy Swindell. However, ignition failure left the number 1 lifeless as Swindell's bad luck in the Kings Royal continued. With all the attrition, only 4 cars were on the lead lap as Steve took the checkered flag and became $50,000 richer. The guy they called the King of the Outlaws became the first to wear the Kings Royal crown 3 times.
We're just so glad to win this thing. We've had a rough 3 weeks and maybe the last month, and this helps us. This helps the whole team to put a little spurt back in everybody.
Despite his claim about recent bad luck, Steve's World of Outlaw record is 23 wins in 46 races, including a victory Thursday night at Hutchinson, Kansas. Well, 3 years ago at the Kings Royal, Brad Doty suffered injuries that have left him paralyzed from the waist down. It's been a long adjustment, but when we visited with him last week, we found him doing just fine. Brad spends most of his time at his home near Fredericksburg, Ohio, with his wife Lori and 2 children, Brandy and Braden. You don't see him traveling to the tracks very often, but there's a good reason for that.
Just because I'm not going to the races, every week or a lot, it's not that I'm feeling sorry for myself, or it's not that I'm bitter at the sport. It's just I've got so many other interests and so much going on.
What keeps him busy? Well, Brad's especially proud of this highly modified Chevy pickup that he's been working on since shortly after the accident. Interestingly enough, it has some high-performance equipment like used to be on his race car. Super Trap mufflers, Carrera shocks, and weld wheels. And he's also building a brand new home, which, with wider hallways, larger doors, and no steps, will allow him to get around easier.
And I'm happy we've got money. We're building a new home, and it's all because of what people have done. The bills were paid, and people have done so much for me that now I'm going to try to do something for other, there's other paraplegics and quadriplegic people that's been paralyzed that haven't been as fortunate as I have as far as benefits and things like that. So if I can help and get us a cure where we can get up walking again, maybe that I can do my part that way.
Brad still has the same winning attitude he had when he was driving a sprint car and is certain that his biggest victory lies ahead.
I'm convinced that there's going to be a cure. Sooner or later, I'll be up again. I'm convinced of that.
Brad will join Darrell Gwynn at a benefit softball game in Charlotte September 17th, with the proceeds going to the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis. ESPN's latest camera angle, the Tread Cam, made its debut last week on Saturday Night Thunder at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Early in the feature, pole sitter Andy Michner and Bob Ciccone were battling for the lead when Michner's engine quit. Somehow, the rest of the 24-car field missed Andy while Ciccone drove to an easy victory. Tonight, the series concludes at the high banks of Winchester, Indiana, where Ciccone didn't have as good a luck the last time we were there. The sprint car portion of the doubleheader that night was rained out. They'll return tonight live beginning at 9 o'clock Eastern. Last week on Saturday Night Thunder, host Dave Despain talked about the family element in motorsports. Well, last weekend, while 1963 Indy 500 winner Parnelli Jones was making his return to racing in the IMSA Firestone Firehawk Series at Laguna Seca, his sons experienced both the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Parnelli's oldest son, 22-year-old PJ, was in Toronto looking for his first Indy Lights win in almost 2 years. That's him in the black car in 4th position, Up ahead, Robbie Buell bumped Eric Bachelard and took the lead, while Robbie Groff moved to second. At the next corner, Bachelard tried to get the position back, and it didn't work. Groff was unable to continue. Bachelard went on to finish sixth. 3 laps from the finish, Jones made a daring move to the inside of Buell, took the lead, and won his first Indy Lights race since Mid-Ohio 1989.
We've had such a monkey on our back since the season started, and last week when we finally finished one, finished second, we finished another one and win. So, I tell you, it was a good race.
Meanwhile, PJ's younger brother, Paige, in black, was engaged in a great battle for the lead in the Barber Saab race at Laguna Seca with series points leader Johnny Robinson. Paige tried to muscle underneath Johnny in turn 3, but contact between the two sent both into the California dirt and out of the race. No hard feelings between the two, but the incident was costly to Robinson, whose points lead slipped to 7 over Brian Herta. Herta won the event, his 3rd of the season. Robinson has won the other 5. How did Dad Parnelli do in that Firehawk race? Well, he placed 35th out of a field of 54, dropping out with transmission problems. And we'll have the story of another racing legend in just a moment. After winning the pole for the ARCA 150 last Saturday at Pocono, a Chrysler product went on to win a super speedway race for the first time since 1979. Is the time right for Chrysler's return to Winston Cup? The story next week.
Ground transportation arranged through General Rent-A-Car, where free unlimited mileage and quality Chrysler cars are just 2 of the reasons people on the move are racing to General.
In Germany, another Formula One pole for Nigel Mansell. The McLarens of Senna and Berger are 2nd and 3rd. Riccardo Patrese and Alain Prost will start 4th and 5th. Prost's teammate John Alesi qualified 6th fastest. Nice run for Andrea De Cesaris after a bad crash at Silverstone. The Benetton Fords will start 8th and 9th. Pierluigi Martini 10th. Wayne Taylor's Intrepid with a 6.5-liter engine has won the pole for tomorrow's IMSA race at Portland. Jeff Brabham, Davy Jones, Juan Manuel Fangio, and Chip Robinson complete the top 5. The center of attention for stock cars is on Talladega Superspeedway, where the Die Hard 500 will be run tomorrow. But earlier this week, the museum located on the Speedway grounds stole the headlines. The 2nd annual International Motorsports Hall of Fame inductions were held Wednesday night at the Jefferson Civic Center in Birmingham, Alabama. Among the 10 inductees, our own ESPN racing analyst Ned Jarrett, a 2-time Winston Cup champion in 1961 and 65. His sons Dale and Glenn and daughter Patty Makar presented the award.
When you consider that every form of motorsports in the world is involved since the day it started, and then after tonight's induction, there still will only be 30 that have been enshrined and been honored in this way. And I'm truly appreciative for that honor.
The others inducted were Bill Vukovich, Fred Lorenzen, Ralph De Palma, Tony Bettenhausen, Phil Hill, Tim Flock, Wilbur Shaw, Carroll Shelby, and Bruce McLaren. Our congratulations to Ned and all the other recipients and their families. And that will do it for another edition of Speed Week. Stay tuned for the NHRA Budweiser Pro Stock Challenge from Englishtown, New Jersey, followed by Saturday Night Thunder. We leave you with highlights from the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Grand Prix at the LA Coliseum, where Ivan Stewart won the Grand National Truck Division. So long, everyone.
Speed Week has been brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. And by Bud Light. Everything else is just a light. Most of the historic video seen on Speed Week is courtesy of Dick Wallen's Racing Classics.
You